So I've heard you talk before a lot about the three states of consciousness, and you even on day one here you talked about the waking, dreaming, deep sleep state. I forget which video it was of yours, but I heard you say something along the lines of like the yogi never sleeps or Brahman never sleeps, and there's always kind of that witness there. And I've noticed as I go deeper into my practice, a lot of these like samadhi states and these really meditative states that I reach, on the floor here kind of spill over to the nighttime. And some nights, especially, during retreats, I find that I'm able to, keep that witnessing, through these relative states of sleep, or at least I'm sort of tempted to go in that direction. And sometimes I do. But I'm wondering, especially after hearing you talk about like the importance of deep sleep, that really restorative sleep, I'm wondering, is it advisable to kind of remain the witness at nighttime, or is it advisable to sort of like just drift off as you normally would without that sort of, I don't want to say focus, but without that like witness? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense, and it's an interesting and also complex question here, because it might also present us with some conflicting perspectives here. Because on one hand, the spontaneity, naturalness of everything is being emphasized over and over, that we don't tiptoe, right? Like you might have even heard me speaking on more than one occasion that this whole kind of mindfulness, is a tiptoeing. So really, you can do it just as long as until it becomes tiring, and then you just, it goes. So witnessing even here, spoken always in terms of a naturally accumulating amount of consciousness. And there's enough awareness, it spills into witness. It becomes witnessing. And you cannot help it, that's the beauty of it. It can have degrees. We might have talked about it in the Pacific Grove, how the witnessing can be dry, right? Very clinical. And then that becomes disconcerting if it takes prolonged period of time, like years, and that does happen. Especially if the platform, because it's a big role plays here, the platform of our understanding, It's like that, allegorically speaking, a hanger on which we hang our coat, or put our hat. If it has that negating attitude towards the world is somehow inferior, experience inferior, right? If you come across these kind of teachings, then witnessing will kind of be almost a disappointment, not dry witness, because it's like, first, it was always accompanied by a relief and a natural dispassion, right? That what some try to cultivate is granted, because that's what witnessing is. Then we spoke about how if witnessing is not dry but oiled, right? It has quality to it, there's bliss, accompanied by bliss, then it is much more desirable. And one would not, as it were, be left dry, disappointed, if it were to prolong, because witnessing, I call it sometimes a camp, reaching certain level where one can actually camp. Now, I often spoke that. It's like before witnessing is established, or before we are established in witnessing, whichever way we want to speak about that, we cannot really stop, relax, and enjoy the scene. But that's the first time when we can kind of, almost like before the final summit, if the verticality of the analogy here could serve us, then it's a place where you can, So witnessing is that it's already being and getting established in the fourth state. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep are not real. In what sense? Not that they are hallucinatory or somehow, but they have duration. They come and go, right? And they have gradations. Because remember, in addition, there are also altogether 9. Remember that? We talked about that? Exactly, the combinations, and that's what makes it rich, not so dry, again, not so black and white. So this is one in the other, and it's like the ultimate expression, let's say deep sleep in deep sleep, or dreaming in dreaming, or waking in waking, maximum peak performance, by the way. So witnessing certainly heralds the not just rise, but getting established in the transcendental field, in the transcendent. And it is also spoken often in terms of stringing the others, piercing, stringing the others. It's a beautiful thing when that happens spontaneously, automatically. And if it happens, you already right now qualified if we are to form a group for Nidra Yoga. This is it. That's the prerequisite. You can actually work in that dimension. You can work from that level. You can work not just in waking, you can take your work into the domain of dream, take in the domain when body rests. Because witnessing is a prerequisite for that. But to clarify with regard to the deep sleep, you see, deep sleep will work as a deep sleep irrespective whether you're witnessing it or blanking out. Because obviously, now, we have to say that awareness is unperturbed by none of these comings and goings. Awareness does not change. The way awareness is functioning, or rather making the whole neurophysiology function, colors how it is then perceived, to what degree. This is what makes it so incredibly interesting. But in a deep sleep, if you, let's say, come to that point when the deep sleep is being pierced, and suddenly there is this witness, there is no this blanking out and then coming out of that, then your deep sleep is not disturbed. You see? In other words, your neurophysiology is not deprived of that deep rest. And the quality, of course, of when the deep sleep is witnessed is, for the majority, for mostly everyone who don't experience that, deep sleep is a complete blanking out. It may have some quality like quality of nothing, like dark, right? Opaque, dark, not luminous. But when it is witnessed, it's a very interesting thing. It's almost as if opening eyes deep down in the water. It's not completely opaque. And that is because there's presence of awareness. And awareness doesn't collapse anymore. It never collapses, obviously. But it is subjected as if subjected to the comings and goings of all these activities that brain, yet not wired enough. Because we can also view this now. I don't have enough language to do that. I don't have enough. I have understanding, but I don't have enough language. Therefore, I'm not going to go into this complete neuroscientific kind of rapport to what's happening in terms of each corresponding to each of these gradations, right? When we fall asleep, watch some dreams, right? Doze off, begin to, it becomes deeper, and then all this has corresponding brainwave activity, obviously. So until our physiology is actually rewired or begin to be rewired, it's impossible to remain witness even throughout dreaming state of consciousness. And that's why we experience this fragmentation. It's consciousness as if fragmented. So therefore they speak about it in scriptural references beautifully, that when it is stringed, then it becomes uninterrupted, as when pouring oil from one container to another. You know that stream, uninterrupted stream, when you pour oil, let's say olive oil. So, as a reassurance, there's absolutely no conflict of interest, as it were, because witnessing here is, it's definitely a landmark. Some people struggle at it for many, many years for the witness to arrive, to remain, to be anchored in witness. And then again, if it is accompanied and has the quality that makes it not clinical, then one can enjoy marvelous things. And then the growth of consciousness continues, because after some camping, it hungers for more. It begins to hunger for more. Because in witnessing, the self is realized, but the world still stands opposite as an object of experience. It's the prerequisite, it's a yoga. This is a beautiful part. This is already self-realization. You see how we're getting back to this, how language can be here, really, like in someone's language, self-realization is all there is. But if we are to give it if we root our discourse in this conversation in some more depth and nuances, then there are degrees, and one of such degrees in the path of self-realization. This is realization of the self, but self as opposite to activity. It stands in opposition to activity, and therefore being witnessed. In fact, without that standing in opposition, witnessing is impossible. You see? So witnessing is not there in complete ignorance and in complete unity. So enjoy the ride, enjoy it, and
thank you. I just wanted to add, the reason I brought it up, and I think I even brought it up at Pacific Grove a little bit in some contexts, is there was almost like a fear there at first to kind of remain that witness, because your body is still functioning and you're just aware of your bodily functions. And I remember even asking myself for the first time this happened, I was like, am I asleep right now, watching myself sleep? And I guess the answer kind of turns out to be yes.
Yes, completely. No, that the aspect of fear, that the novelty of that is there, because the unusual nature of that experience, because somehow prior to that it was very much associated with that being conked out, right, blanking out, it's gone, right, and we consider, well, that is what rest is. You see, so that separation here is a very, very subtle and important process at the level of consciousness and physiology as well. So since you made that addition, maybe it will be good to also add that separation is a necessary part which also corresponds to neurophysiological activity, where it feels as if we are at some point not sleeping. The body is resting. You measure it in terms of the equipment, and the waves will be corresponding. Brain waves, the heart activity, pulse, metabolic rate will correspond to, let's say, that phase of dreaming, state of consciousness. And yet, you are kind of wide awake. And that wide awake sends these signals in the nervous system. Is that normal? And therefore, it cannot completely let go. And this is why, for many years, when this, I don't want to kind of turn it into sort of like, again, like Dr. Kufayev, sort of like, but people would come up, it's like, man, I haven't slept for 6 years, like literally. I haven't slept, or more recently, this person again reached out. It's been like maybe a few months, like completely, I cannot sleep at all. There's no sleep. And you, of course, you go into that protocol. You go into that protocol. First, psychological climate needs to be restored, that this is fine. In fact, it's a very, very good process. But some management is required here. And again, this will take us back to the importance of physiological dominating factor here, what we are. You see? Like, for example, and just without making assessments, but maybe in your case, Vata is not so dominant as a dosha. So therefore, there is enough Pitta and Kapha in you. But for the Vata person, this disturbance in sleep may actually translate into inability to sleep. You see? So then that would need to be remedied also at the level of the physiology. So in other words, one would need to do something not taking sleeping pills. And that happens. Even meditation teachers resort to sleeping pills because they don't know what to do. They teach others to meditate, but in their own life, they are on pills because that's what they went through. And if there is this vacuum in understanding, if there is this lack in understanding, then it can cause this psychological dent. I need to sleep, I need to, especially in the profession or whatever, you need to get up and be functional. So